Literally in the same day, I had a beer with a friend of mine who's a planner who is working on his own place at the moment, and was like, "Oh, Nico, mate, yeah, you got to do it. You have to do it. It's the best thing." I was like, "Okay, cool." And then half an hour later, I went down the road to meet with two other friends, one architect and one developer, and I was telling them about it, and they're like, "Mate, what are you doing? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Don't build your own house. You're going to chew up all the equity you've accrued in the 8 years. It's going to be gone. All that kind of appreciation. You're going to overcapitalize and going to be completely burnt out. We're redlining with the mortgage, like we're lending to the absolute limit to kind of get it done."
Building involves more than just personal style. It's about budget, functionality, working with your specific site, and making sure your home seamlessly integrates into your life. I'm Sam Payne, and welcome to Australian Build Stories. Join me as we chat with real people who've embarked on their own building journey. We'll explore their highs, lows, and valuable lessons they learned along the way. Australian Build Stories. Building knowledge, one story at a time. Nic and I have known one another for around 10 years, from back when I had my design firm, and when I later transitioned to coaching architects and interior designers on their business operations. Nic was my first client. In my opinion, Nic's talent for design sets him apart from many architects. In fact, I believe it's only a matter of time until Australia sees another architectural masterpiece like the Sydney Opera House, and Nic's the architect to watch. But in today's conversation, Nic is sharing the personal story which highlights significant challenges for Nic the architect, but a triumph for Nic the dad and husband. Join me in this conversation with Nic, where we talk about the house he designed for him and his family. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Homebase Design and Build Centre, Australia's largest building and renovation destination.
We'd been looking, so we being my wife Geordie and I, had been looking for a year and a half for a piece of land, and the idea was we wanted to buy a piece of land and build ourselves. We loved being near the ocean. We were living in a suburb called Cottesloe here in Western Australia, but we couldn't afford land in Cottesloe or house in Cottesloe, so we identified this little pocket of Mosman Park, which is the suburb to the south, that was as close to the beach as most of Cottesloe is, but was half the price because you had to cross a rail line and a road to get to the beach. And we identified our pocket, we'd done the research, and we kept looking, and then one finally came up, and because we knew everything, we just hit them with the offer that we said was fair, we thought was fair, and they agreed straight away, and it was done.
When was that?
2015. We were also we're about to get married, and we're thinking about having kids, and so the idea was that we're trying to do things quite orderly, like we'd probably get married and then maybe have a kid and then think about the house, and then it went the other way. We found the land and did that first and then got married and then had a kid. Yeah, so it was, we were looking for a couple of key things, which was the location of it, but then also we wanted it to have a long north boundary. So it was small, so it was within our price range, but it was long to the north side. And part of the feasibility that we did on it was that I kind of made sure that before we put an offer in, I'd sort of draw a house and go, can we actually build the house we want on this? And there were, lots of back and forth about there's not enough storage, where are we going to put the clothesline, all that sort of stuff. We'll solve that. That'll come later. But yeah, it was they were the big non-negotiables, which is that we needed long to north, small enough that we could actually afford it and afford to build a house on it, and located, well.
Yep. So was the design process pretty quick?
Yeah, it was one of those ones that came out. Well, it's the way we still design all our homes, which is long to north, push to the southern boundary, create a northern garden, let northern light come in, skinny plan so you can get cross ventilation through it and open it up and let the breeze blow through. And then it was just hyper rational. It was just a rectangle with 4 bays in it, and the bays were over 2 levels. So on the ground floor it was a living, a dining, a kitchen and a studio, and then below that it was bedroom, bathroom.
Yeah, okay. And then so when you purchased the block to when you completed the design, did you start engaging with a builder when you were in design, or did you go through council first?
I think this was probably the lesson learned, is that we went through the design and had a little bit of builder input, but basically did the design and went to tender. And then that was one of the first of many false starts.
False starts as in came in higher than...
Came in, it's... So we at that time I think it was, the price came back what we could get approved for the build, and then what the build cost was. We were 100 or 150k out, and so we had to wait until we could try and close that gap or save that cash.
What was the general thought? Was it like let's wait, or did you want to tweak the plans, or did you want to?
Well, there wasn't much we could, like, it was this 3-bedroom or 3.5, a studio, a flexible space, and one bathroom, and it was 180 square meters all up, so it was pretty tight plan. There wasn't much to squeeze out of it, and I didn't want to compromise too much on like the materiality and the finish and the way it came out, because I thought if I'm doing that on my own house, then I can't stand, authentically in front of clients and tell them to do the right thing when I'm not doing it myself.
Yep.
So that felt important to stay true to. And so that was then just working through a process with the builders and then working through our own financial situation to try and land something that, meant that we could get that outcome.
Yep. So where did that get to?
It got to a lot of waiting. So at that point we had just had our first child, and we were living with my wife's mum, trying to save money, to save a deposit, and the price kept moving away as fast as we were saving money, and so we kind of never closed that gap, and we just sort of decided that, we were adults and we couldn't, at the age of, I think I was 35 or something at the time, I couldn't be living with my mother-in-law with a 1-year-old kid. So we took a rental, and just because for sanity and putting on big boy pants just felt like the thing you had to do, and we had to do, and so we took a rental, and that then pushed the dream further away. Yeah, but it was but it was what we had to do at the time. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So what year are we in sort of now? In terms
we're in about 2017 now.
Okay. Yeah. It's been a couple of years.
Yeah.
So you've done the initial design.
Yeah.
Had some pricing. It's too much, so you put it on the back burner until we can.
Then we had a second round of pricing in about 2018.
Yep.
And that was still close, but this time it was really tight on the servicing, and we still didn't have the deposit, because the deposit is just so hard to come up with. And we didn't have the bank of mum and dad or anyone to help, so we've been trying to. This is the whole thing. Been trying to do it on our own, and I'm running practice on my own, and my wife's an artist, so it's not sort of, although we are comfortable and things are going well, back in those days it was quite fledgling and starting out for both of us.
So did you have any conversations in that time on what if this doesn't work and do we need to look at other plans?
No, I'm pretty stubborn and stupid like that. I try to not force things, but I kind of always believed it would happen, and when it would happen at the right time, the right way, but just to keep sort of pushing forward. So whatever the problem was, then to go and try and solve that problem. Just kept pushing.
And then, so what was the next thing that happened after that?
The next thing that happened was then our second kid was on the way, and we were at about 2019, and practice was pretty wobbly. With the second kid on the way, I needed a stable income, and I went and there was an opportunity to work with the state government here, and I went and took that job, and I was there for a year. And then went back to practice. But the problem was that because in that time we were then trying to get it going again, but Geordie we'd had the second kid, so we didn't have her income. That meant we couldn't do the servicing. We were starting to save some money, and we're getting closer, but this servicing ability was down, but our deposit was up, and at the same time prices are kind of getting away from us a little bit as well.
Yeah, okay.
And then what happens there, when I left the job with the government and back into private practice, the thing is that even though my practice is a company and pays me as an employee a wage, they still classify me as a sole practitioner. And that therefore meant I needed 2 years of pay slips for them to actually then do it. So we were then now having to wait another 2 years. And then in those 2 years, COVID happened. So we had 2 years, we had COVID. And then what took us through to, 2022, 2023. And we did pricing again. And in terms of numbers from the start, the plans originally back in 2015, 2016 were about, it's going to cost us $600,000 to build it, 600 to 650. 2019, it went up to about 800, 900.
Yeah, that's 600 sounding pretty good now, isn't it?
Yeah, so good. but again, we couldn't pay for it back then. And then and then 2021, it was about 1.1, 1.2, and then finally it was 1.5, 1.6.
And same plans the whole way through?
We made a change. So originally we were doing a big basement. We were doing a double height ground floor and then tucking all the bedrooms under in a semi-basement with a southern courtyard. And we deleted the basement and put the bedrooms above to try and save some money, but just the escalation in that 2-3 years between the pricing meant that the cost savings just meant that we still hit the same price.
It's just eroded into it.
Yeah. So by the end, with the revised plans, it was still we were still really happy with what it was going to be.
Yeah.
We were still at like 1.5 to 1.6.
Wow. And then in terms of that price, because it's just such a big range that it went from 6, not even just doubling to 1.5.
Yeah.
Was it the same builders, or like were the builders saying like giving you
similar builders?
Okay.
Yeah. So we had by the end we had 2 builders who we used quite often who both hit basically 1.5, 1.6. So it's not that the builder's pricing was wrong. It's just that's what's happened to the market in that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so it sounds like for most of the 9-year journey, for at least 8 years, you were pretty convinced it was going to be going ahead. And it wasn't until last November that there was one of those 5-second sliding door moments where there was a change of plans. Can you talk about that a little bit?
It was literally in the same day I had a beer with a friend of mine who's a planner who is working on his own place at the moment and was like, "Oh, Nico, mate, yeah, you got to do it. You have to do it. It's the best thing." I was like, "Okay, cool." And then half an hour later, I went down the road to meet with 2 other friends, one architect and one developer, and I was telling them about it, and they're like, "Mate, you're a idiot. What are you doing? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Don't build your own house. You're going to chew up all the equity you've accrued in the 8 years. It's going to be gone. All that kind of appreciation. You're going to overcapitalize, and you're going to be completely burnt out." We're redlining with the mortgage, like we were lending to the absolute limit to get it done. And then we're going to have to trying to come up with cash sort of a bit out of thin air to complete it. And we'd end up with the dream home, but I just wouldn't sleep at night. So it was after that chat with them and them also giving me a bit of a path forward. It literally happened overnight. So that after that conversation, I went home, I got on realestate.com. I found something that met the new criteria of what we were looking for. Saw it on the Saturday, took Geordie through on the Sunday. We made an offer on the Monday. It was accepted on the Friday and done.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
it's quick.
Yeah.
New criteria?
New criteria was I wanted just to find a piece of land that had a house that basically came along for free and on a piece of land that we could chop up but show the opportunity and the possibility of, but then hold the house on a house that was pushed forward on the block with great established trees, a house with good bones that without too much work could actually be made to be livable and beautiful.
Yep.
So we found this big piece of land just up the road on a laneway, so a gazetted lane as well. So we didn't need to do a battle axe or throw a kind of a car access down the side. So it's literally just drawing a line down the middle of the block, and then we could sell the back block, take the proceeds from that, throw it on top of the mortgage for the whole thing, and just basically have a really minimal mortgage and a house and flexibility of what we need to do in the future. So this isn't a forever home. It's a step, but it's a way to help us have options and decide what we want to do.
When I consider what the difference would have been for you if you went down the path of having built the house, I mean, I understand there would have been huge financial pressure, but in terms of what it would have been for your brand, a few Instagram things, a separate section on the website.
Yeah.
Probably not a whole lot else.
No, it would have made a lot of difference 8 years ago and minimal difference today. Yeah. That's the thing I think I unpicked, which is that I'm an architect and a creative, and there's the compulsion to kind of design and do things to create and show people what I can do and, put a bit of a flag in the ground. But as the years progressed, I feel that a lot less because I've built my practice out. I do get to do that every day now. I have these amazing opportunities and I don't need to put another great house out into the world for any reason. It would have been amazing to live in it as a family, and we will get that opportunity at some point. But for now, my girls are 6 and 4. Time is short and they just want a roof to live under, a house that we're all in together. And so to go through an 18 to 24 month build process while we're still renting, they just don't care. They just want to be in a house where we're all there together, and it's just probably easier just to give them that.
And then so with the house that you purchased, it sounds like you're going to do a little renovation to it. Would that be quite sort of architectural, or will it be just something really...
We tried to find Granny's house, like the ugliest house possible that had zero value, so that we can realise and create that value where people would have seen it only as land value. Like this house it was built in 1955 and it has not been touched since then. So it's got like wooden flappy saloon doors and shag pile carpet and terrible tiles and a kitchen that's falling to pieces and all of that. But it's still like great bones. It's like brick, Jarrah floors. It's really solid and well put together. So we just want to do a very cosmetic, bring the floors back, clean it up, put a nice kitchen in, not move too much around yet. Like we might, maybe if we stay there, we might do a more substantial addition to it. But really it's just alterations and just basically make it nice.
Yep. Yeah. And then for people who are thinking about embarking on their own build and have those sort of forever home aspirations, what lessons have you picked up that you think are valuable for people to consider?
Well, I don't know. I don't think I'm the right person to answer that because I didn't do it. I guess the lesson for me was, I don't know what my advice would be for the forever home. Maybe there's no such thing as a forever home. Maybe there's just the present home and it's just
for now homes.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and I think there's also that idea of future flexibility. There's nothing worse than one person living in a giant house and feeling the ownership or the responsibility for those things, or, you know, like 5 people trying to live in a 2-bedroom house. I'm just at the point where I'm trying to create peace and calmness in my life, and I think I've lived the last 20 years of my career like at pretty high throttle pace, and I love my career, I love doing great work, but my priority is still being a great father and being around and being present and creating a healthy future for my family is also now as important, and so I don't want one to impact the other.
Any other reflections that you had? I mean, it's a huge period of time. What would be the main stories that really stand out to you as quite pivotal?
The interesting thing is that the design I did basically before we bought the block of land is still fundamentally the design we were going to build. So that is interesting that didn't change over 8 years, that the fundamentals and the principles that I kind of put into that still hold true and still are pretty much how we approach a lot of our single residential projects in the practice. That was interesting. I thought, like, I remember being in my 20s and designing dream homes, and every 3 weeks, you know, I'd be trying something different. But it feels like that approach is now baked in and is right and works, and you know, and has all the kind of the really pragmatic fundamentals of, you know, good environmental design and good rational planning, but then moments of joy and delight and all that kind of stuff too, which is, I think, you know, so important to living and life. But yeah, other than that, we now always just have a builder almost from day one with us. And I think that's a really good learning, or, you know, something that we have learnt through the process of practice over many, many projects. So yeah, builders on board almost, from the start, and just constantly checking in, working with them as part of the team for budget advice, construction advice, all that sort of stuff. So I've also been into some forever homes where I like walk around and it feels like there's no room for the unexpected, or that there's no room for growth or change. It feels like almost this static, locked jewelry box. It's like this perfect thing. And it's almost the house takes precedence over the life that's happening in it. It's like by acquiring, this is our thing we've worked for, the home. And the home becomes the object rather than the thing that happens within the house.
So it doesn't feel like lived in, or it doesn't feel...
It feels that the balance is skewed, that the reason we create homes to live in is because we want to create beautiful moments and memories with our family and friends. But sometimes it feels like the home is created as the object or the reason, and that everything is deferential to that. And so the memory is of the home, not of the moments in the home.
Yeah. What do you think it is that does that tips it over that edge?
Just reckon it's like an energy. It's where everything is done and everything's thought of. There's nothing that's gone wrong, and it feels like, I'm not sure. There's a few moments where I felt that, and I just feel, I wonder what it would be like growing up as a kid in a house like that, where it almost feels like the house is like another family member.
Okay,
you know,
it's too perfect.
Yeah, you know, that you're, you know, always having to be aware of the house, you know, like the importance of the house or the specialness of the house.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
Yeah, it loses that ability just to kind of bring the mess in and live life in the space because you're too concerned about denting timber. And
I think back to some of my favourite spaces and places I've been in, like our beach house that I grew up in Mount Martha on the Mornington Peninsula, and that was a timber 2-story building, basically a builder's project home, but it was actually really beautiful. But it wasn't like, negative details and you like highly refined bent. It was just like a well-planned, beautiful house with great light coming in, and then just the light and sound and smells and noises of like family and life and all that sort of rattling around, and just warmth and joy and memory. And then my wife's family home, which again was kind of a mock heritage extension, but her mum is so good at making things feel like welcome, like, pots hanging above the kitchen and like a kitchen bench that was like all the biggest conversations happened at, like welcoming, sunny, open door kind of vibe. And it's got as much to do with, it's the architecture, but kind of in service of living.
Do you think that's where, as the architect, or when you're doing the design, you have to know when to stop and allow people to put those touches in? And
100%. I think we always say that what we do should be the backdrop to what happens. We don't want you looking at, like looking around and looking at all the details and stuff. It should be, your furniture, your art, your family, your life. That should be the stuff that kind of is the thing that adds the flourish to the space.
Yeah.
All the little accoutrements, that's like the little oddities, that's what actually makes things fun. Like perfection is inhuman, right? Yeah. But imperfection is human. Yeah. So that's what we was trying to say before.
Yeah. That's why I bought this place in Mosman Park.
It's very imperfect.
And then in terms of if people are wanting to go down the journey, and it's obviously such a huge process, and a lot of people don't know that it's going to be so big until they do get started. Where would you suggest people start in terms of, do they initially talk to an architect, talk to a builder? Like, what conversation should they be having to get clear on budget and brief? And
I think there's lots of good resources out there for budget and brief. A lot of architects are happy just to have a chat. Don't feel scared just to pick up the phone and just call someone and just talk it through. There's normally no commitment for a while at least. And I know we always try and make sure that everyone leaves a conversation with us with a next step. So even if we can't help someone, we'll make sure that we provide a list of people that can, or at least we go through a lot of briefing processes and costing processes with people that we never proceed with, just so that we can actually give them good information and help them on their journey. So we do a fairly thorough briefing session, a good discovery session that is normally an hour, going through the normal things like budget and timeline, and who do you want to work with, and do you have a brother who's a builder, or who's in the sphere that we want to lean on, and how many bedrooms, and all that kind of stuff. But then really more emotive, and how do you want to feel in the space? What does success look like? Are there spaces from your history that are really important that we want to try and recreate in here? What do you look forward to most when you get home? All these kind of things that are a bit more esoteric and loose and kind of wafty, which is really actually what architecture is. Like, architecture isn't the materials, it isn't the walls and the floor, it's the feeling inside those spaces. So tell us the spaces you want, but then tell us how we want to actually imbue those spaces with feeling and joy and delight and all that kind of stuff. So we do that, and then we throw rates on it and go, well, it seems like you're telling us this sort of house size, these are the all the rats and mice of permits and consultants, and basically try and give people good information, so then they can go away and actually go, can I go ahead with this? This is how much an architect's going to cost, this is how much, we've got a budget of whatever it is, but actually our budget is X plus Y, can we still proceed? Yeah.
And then in terms of some of those resources that you said exist, is there any that you know of that are good that you could point people to?
I can't think of any online. I'm sure. How about I give you that as research? You can go and do some homework and put it in a link or something.
So I did go and have a look at what was out there, and I didn't find anything great. So I decided to create something myself. I spent a lot of time thinking about what are those key conversations you need to have to make sure that your project's successful. And I've developed a pretty comprehensive guide. It's got a raft of different sections covering things like timeline, your budget, how to develop a budget and understanding what needs to go into that, what some of your reasons for building are. It's got a section on orientation and understanding how your home's going to interact with your site. It's got a whole lot more. Head over to australianbuildstories.com. There's a resources section and you can download your design brief workbook from there. Back to the show.
And if people want to find out more about you, where do they go?
On our website, nicbrunsdon.com, or Instagram at Nic Brunsdon.
Yep. You do residential?
As a practice, we've pivoted to, we don't see ourselves as an architecture practice. We now sort of see ourselves as a design practice that sometimes produces architecture. We're kind of much more into, well, we produce built form, but we now kind of have a bit of a test for if we're doing single residential, is that does it have an impact outside of its lot boundaries?
Yeah.
So we're not doing houses that just influence the house and the people in the house only anymore. Is there a bigger story to tell in terms of sustainability or in terms of multi-generational living or innovative materials and these kinds of things? So we do houses, but they've got to have some sort of influence or impact that is greater than just the house on the street.
Yeah, and I imagine that the clients then have to be advocating for that in the first instance.
Well, the clients are always up for it. Well, the people that we work with, they're up for it. Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
If you reflect on the entire experience, how has it shaped you personally and professionally?
I think there's just the first bit, which is just the passage of time, and that you're never the same person at the start of a thing as you are from day to day, moment to moment. And it's almost like this dream of the house has been the constant, but we've changed against that.
Yep.
And I think recognising that we've changed against that was probably the key learning, that we are not the same amount of people. There's 4 of us when we were 2 when we started.
Yeah.
We have different hopes and desires for our family and our present today than we did 8 years ago. And I think just being self-aware enough was kind of the big learning, because I wasn't for a long time. I was just like blindly trying to push through. Yeah.
I think that's pretty valuable.
True.
Well, thank you very much, Nic.
Thanks, mate.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been great.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Australian Build Stories. Reflecting on the conversation with Nic, for me there's a couple of really key takeaways. One of them is, when the market's moving, for the average person, you're not going to be able to outsave the market. And 2, having the ability to step back and make sure what you're working towards still makes sense for you. This is critical, and this is about understanding your project's narrative. So in this instance, the narrative changed because the earlier narrative was about Nic the architect getting a project that could help his business grow, but then over time it became, this is for our family, and what made sense for us at one point doesn't make sense anymore, and proceeding just wasn't the right move. So this can be really challenging, especially when it's something that you've been working towards for years and you've spent a lot of money in, but sometimes it's the right move and you're the only one who's going to be able to make that call. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode and gotten something valuable from it. If you like this episode, please rate the show on wherever you listen to your podcast. That's going to help other people find the show. And if you have any questions or want to submit your build story, head to australianbuildstories.com. Thanks.